Morning, Chris. Can't hear you, old chap.
Muted. Can you hear me now? We're just about to start. Alison Salis, who is behind the scenes, is very strict about muting everybody until 1 second before we're due to start. So once she sounds a klaxon, I'll be ready to go. In fact, I think we are ready to go. This is the beauty of working remotely and working distantly. Right, go, go, go is a tribute to Murray Walker. Thanks very much, everyone. My name is Chris Maguire. I'm hosting today's Ambassadors event. A really exciting event, actually. Really looking forward to it. We've got 6 fantastic speakers today. We're going to be talking about a project called AMPI, which stands for the Advanced Manufacturing and Productivity Institute. We're also going to be talking about the whole levelling up agenda, which has never been more important. Just a reminder, if you want to submit a question, you can. At the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A facility. So that's all you need to do is submit a question to that, and we'll ask the questions towards the end. So before I introduce the main panel, I'm going to start by introducing the Chief Executive of Rochdale Borough Council, Steve Rumbelow, who's been a very, very busy man. I think it's important, Steve, just to have an overview of where we're at. How are you, first of all? You're on mute at the moment. I think you've been unmuted now. Good news.
Thank you. Yes, that's Alison in control as usual. Yeah. I'm fine, thank you, Chris. Hope you're good too.
Very good indeed. Very good indeed. This isn't a conversation where we're going to be talking about COVID for an hour. Everyone will be pleased to know, but I think it would be remiss of me not to start by talking about COVID. The schools are back, vaccinations are in overdrive, non-essential retail shops are due to reopen again on April the 12th. What position would you say, Steve, Rochdale's in?
I think Rochdale's we're in a decent place. The infection rate across Greater Manchester as a whole, and that's reflected here in Rochdale as well, is quite stubborn. It's come down very slowly. It's still here in Rochdale around 100 per 100,000, which is higher than we would like it to be at this point on the Prime Minister's roadmap to easing restrictions. On vaccinations, we're doing well. We've done 88,000 first doses already. All the priority groups 1 to 4 have been offered the vaccine with a reasonably good take-up in common with everywhere else. We're targeting particular groups to try and maximise that take-up. And we're just in the stages of offering all over 50s the vaccine as well. So we're making decent progress on that. But I think probably what the key thing is how the roadmap goes and whether we can hit those key milestones, applying those 4 tests that the government have said they're going to apply. And what happened last time when lockdown was released is that certain parts of the country were running behind other parts of the country, and the government tended to take decisions based on what worked for London. And I think it's generally now accepted that certainly the Northwest was brought out of lockdown measures too early, and that meant we've spent the summer in some form, well, it's not the summer, the year, in some form of restrictions, which is not where we want to be on this journey out. And I guess the wider picture that's really important is that COVID has shone a real spotlight on certain things, on inequality generally, on geographic inequality, health inequality, racial inequalities, gender inequalities. It's clearly also going to mean that we've got big challenges in terms of mental health as we come out of it. And more recently, I think what we've seen is early and worrying signs that social cohesion could have been quite significantly damaged, and we need to build back trust in public policy, I think.
No, thanks very much, Steve. One thing that struck me when I look back at the year, it's hard to believe it's a year and a day now since the announcement by Boris. But in terms of what Rochdale's done, Rochdale has seemed to have cracked on, if you like. I mean, announced your 10-year growth strategy during the pandemic. Rochdale Riverside opened in April during the pandemic as well. Has that been a deliberate decision by Rochdale to try and, not business as usual, but to make sure that the whole town and the whole borough doesn't stop?
Well, we were on those paths anyway. We were doing that work anyway. But yes, we took a very clear decision that we had to prepare for June the 21st, what we hope will be a complete stepping out of most of the restrictions. The growth plan, it's a very small document, as people can probably see, but it's a big plan. and that was always the intention. We wanted to make sure that we emerged out of what we knew would be a COVID-driven economic shock by having things in place that meant we could drive the economy forward. So that plan's got a million square feet of new employment space in it, 20,000 new jobs associated with that, 12,000 new homes, a big focus on brownfield sites, a big focus on the rail corridor, 7,000 new homes associated with the rail corridor. The Northern Gateway site, which will drive the economy out of this recession, hopefully. And that is something that we've been working on for a long time. So a lot of these plans have been in train for a long time. And of course, in terms of the Riverside one, well, it was finished when it was finished, wasn't it? It was already on site, it was already being built. It was finished Easter last year. And so we didn't have very much choice really but to open it. But we are pleased with how it's gone in these very uncertain times. It was already difficult for retailing, and obviously COVID has made it very, very difficult indeed. It's 80% let at the moment. We fully expect to be saying that it's 90% let by the time we get to the 12th of April, when non-essential retail can reopen.
We're going to talk a lot about the levelling up agenda today. There's a number of funds that are going to get mentioned. There's two that I want to draw your attention to, Steve, if I may. One's the Towns Fund, and the other one is the Future High Streets Fund. Can you just tell us a bit about those and why they're important to Rochdale?
Well, I think in terms of the funding, I mean, clearly those two funds are important because we've got them. For first and foremost, it's £40 million, not quite in the bank, but more or less in the bank. So it means that we can use those funds to drive something forward. And one of the projects that some of that funding will go towards is the AMPI project that we're spending most of today talking about. So I won't touch on that. But it's important, I think, to get a big slug of capital, 15 million, available for that project. And Future High Streets Fund, a big chunk of that is going to be used to deal with the appraisal gaps on the next phase of the town centre redevelopment, which is 240 apartments and a hotel. So it's crucial in that sense, but it's small beer. It's, you know, we want to get ourselves in a position where we can use public money to start to get the values in a place where the private sector can take more of the strain than it's able to take at the moment. But that is going to be the long haul.
There's a couple of things. We're going to talk a lot about manufacturing and the importance of advanced manufacturing as well. You know, we've just checked actually, we've got 133 people currently watching this webinar right now. Now, a large chunk of those will be manufacturers and advanced manufacturers. How important is that sector to Rochdale?
Manufacturing, I mean, Rochdale's a manufacturing town. And although we've had all the sort of hits that manufacturing has had, I think what the last recession showed us, never mind this one, is that making stuff and exporting stuff, making it well, exporting it, has got to be part of a successful modern economy. So advanced manufacturing is crucial to us. We've got a history in manufacturing, still got a very significant portion of our workforce are employed in manufacturing. I think it's about 16%, which is way above the national average, miles above the GM average. And we want to use that history of success to shape a new success, a new direction in innovation and advanced manufacturing. And we believe that that's got to be part of UK PLC's economic progress. And why shouldn't we be leading it?
We're going to hear about AMPI. There's something else I want to talk to you about. There's acronyms for everything. This one is called GAMMA, which stands for the Graphene Advanced Materials and Manufacturing Alliance. Why is that so important? And because a lot of people in Rochdale may not have heard of it, why is that important for Rochdale for, Steve?
Well, it's important because of the things I've just said about what's important for the economy. Greater Manchester put together a sort of innovation prospectus that was part of its submission for what would have been the spending review last year that never took place. And it's actually good to see that the government have picked up some of the messages in that submission around innovation. And this was part of Greater Manchester's response, and it's particularly helpful to us because Gamma is very much focused on the strategic site known as Northern Gateway, which will be the biggest strategic site in employment site in Greater Manchester. The first time that's happened in the north of the conurbation. And so, you know, we talked about the levelling up agenda. There's a massive levelling up agenda within Greater Manchester as well. And part of the combined authorities strategy is to make sure that there is a shared involvement in the economic growth that we can achieve. And that's got to be good for the north of the conurbation and Rochdale in particular.
Yeah, we're going to hear about a number of things today. One thing that keeps cropping up in conversations is a spatial framework. Now that's really important, isn't it? Why is that so important to somewhere like Rochdale?
Well, it's another big plan. I mean, it's been around for a while, as we all know. It's of course not called the spatial framework anymore. It's places for everyone. It's the plan formerly known as the spatial framework. But it was important when it started out, and it was important because it was about Greater Manchester's ambition. It was about charting a course that enabled us to maximise our growth and to be the place that we want to be. And it speaks directly to the levelling up agenda. You know, Greater Manchester's been tuned into that agenda for well more than a decade now, described by us in slightly different terms. It's described about in terms of wanted to be seen as a contributor to UK PLC's economy, not a taker. But that's a proxy measure really, because if we achieve that, it means that the economy is flying and our people, in terms of their health and well-being, are better. You know, the levelling up agenda can be seen as an economic strategy, but it's actually a social policy as well.
Just a final question I'm going to ask, and this I should just congratulate you for your sartorial elegance, because you're still wearing a tie. You know, you've never dropped your standards despite, you know, over the last year. But in terms of the levelling up,
not sure about the hair.
No, no. Well, I can't criticise anyone for their hair. But in terms of the levelling up fund, how important is that?
I think it's an important principle that the government have restated as part of the budget. It's sort of stalled, hasn't it, if we're honest, over the last year, but for understandable reasons on one level. It's important to us because it's a fund that's available to do the sort of things that we want to do. It is not how I would want to see government funding places like Rochdale. I would want to see much more devolved funding. We are, I'm afraid, going to be entering a period of the government having lots of bidded funds, and that's not the best way of doing things, but it's the only way of doing it. It's the only way on the table, and therefore we've got to get ourselves ready for that. We've been doing a lot of work to prepare projects that are ready to fund, ready to invest in, and that's going to be crucial because we all know that the government are taking fairly short-term view of some of this for obvious reasons. A lot of this money they want spent before the next, invested before the next election. And that, you know, that has its downsides. We've got to be honest about it. But we're just pleased to be in a position to be able to take advantage of what money is out there. The big challenge, I think, going forward is that this levelling up agenda is not a short-term agenda. You know, we've not got a great track record in the UK of having effective regional policy. And to make levelling up work, it's got to be based on a long-term, effective regional economic policy. And as I said, we've not really done that in the past to any great degree. So it is still going to be a hard road and a challenging journey for the government if they're serious about it. And it'll be a hard road for us, but we're up for it because we know that in the long term, the benefits for boroughs like Rochdale are just going to be massive.
Okay, thanks very much, Steve. I'm going to hand the baton on, actually, in this race. Paul Dixon, the chairman of This Is Rochdale, a partner of Molesworth, Bright, Clegg. I know you normally do these conversations, Paul, in your office in Rochdale, and it looks to me like the sun is shining in Rochdale this morning. Is that right, Paul? Can you give me a weather report?
The sun is shining in Rochdale this morning, Chris, as it does every day in Rochdale, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to hear a lot about AMPI. Your job is basically to answer every single question that we can possibly answer about AMPI, which obviously stands for the Advanced Manufacturing and Productivity Institute, to give it its full title. What is AMPI? You know, for those people who've never heard of it, or maybe heard of it but don't know what it is, give us an idiot's guide.
The first thing I'm going to do, Chris, is pull you up on the name. It's actually the Advanced Machinery and Productivity Institute.
Now, my mistake, absolutely. I always put that one in there deliberately, just to make sure you're awake, Paul, and you've passed with flying colours.
Thank you for that, Chris. And it's important that, because it's going to do what it says on the tin. It's a high-level research and development facility that is going to imagine, design and develop the manufacturing technologies of the future and provide the skills to operate them and to continue to develop them. Why is it so important for Rochdale? Well, first of all, 2 years ago or so, anybody would have told you you're not going to get a research and development facility in a town like Rochdale. We're now proving them wrong. It proves that the levelling up agenda is starting, and it's starting here in Rochdale. And I think Rochdale is probably ahead of most of the country, and it's in the actions that's been taken over the last 12 months. Thirdly, it's going to change the media perception of Rochdale. It already is. The media chatter about Rochdale these days is what we're doing. It's about AMPI, it's about everything else that we're doing in terms of economic development in the borough. And that sort of perception of Rochdale is now changing, and it's changing the local media, and it's changing in the national media. And also, it's proof, if ever proof were needed, that Rochdale's rediscovered its DNA, the spirit of 1844 and cooperation, because AMPI is coming to life as a result of a cooperative partnership between the public sector, the private sector, and various other institutions. RDA have been fantastic in the support for the project and getting it this far and getting the Towns Fund bid submitted and successfully allocated to us. Local private sector businesses have been right behind the project, and it's an idea that came from the private sector. You're going to hear from Tony Bannon shortly and Paul Shaw, who are the innovators of this concept. And we have support from National Physical Laboratory, the NPL, which is part of the Department for Business and Energy and Industrial Strategy. So it's this amazing partnership of public and private sector interests that are going to make AMPI happen, that proves that Rochdale has, as I say, rediscovered its DNA and is looking to the future.
And the thing is, this isn't a pipe dream. Where are we in terms of funding and a venue for AMPI?
15 months ago, it was very much still a pipe dream. And the amount of work that's been done since then by all the partners has got us to where we are now, with the first announcement of a successful funding bid, and that's the Towns Fund that Steve's already alluded to, and with 15 million or so of that will be allocated to construct AMPI, to start the building. There's another bid that's been submitted, and our partners at the NPL led on that bid, and that's for something called the Strengthening Places Fund. We're expecting an announcement on that at the end of April. It's fingers crossed. Nobody's making any wild predictions, but I think cautious optimism is a fair description of the mood amongst all the partners involved in the project. Having had the Towns Fund announcement, design work is now going to start on AMPI with a view to getting the building up and out of the ground as quickly as possible.
I was going to ask you about that. You just mentioned the timetable. Is there a timetable for AMPI?
We've got to have a business case and a design in place within 12 months. It's entirely possible we'll have planning permission within that time. And once we've got planning permission, then we can start the build. The
media sometimes get accused of using glib lines like game changer, which I'm going to use now. It's been described as a game changer for Rochdale. One of the important things is AMPI isn't just about manufacturing and advanced manufacturing. You know, the benefit of a project of this scale will go across all sectors, won't it? All of Rochdale, all the 140 some odd people watching this conversation now could benefit from AMPI. How will that happen?
The very fact that we will have AMPI in Rochdale will attract other companies into Rochdale. We've seen this with other R&D facilities around the country, Sheffield, Coventry. They attract high-end manufacturing and technology businesses around them, because those businesses want to be part of an innovation ecosystem. They want to be close to AMPI. They will bring with them high-level, highly skilled, well-paid jobs. That will have an impact on the housing market in Rochdale. It will have an impact on schools. It will have an impact on retail. It will have an impact on all the service industries in and around Rochdale. AMPI at a very low level requires services, and those orders are already being placed with local suppliers. And I think there's probably a couple on this call today. I think one statistic that's of relevance is for every manufacturing job created, there are 3 service sector jobs required to service that requirement in manufacturing. So it's going to attract other forms of employment into the borough. It's also going to have a radical impact on the skills delivery in the borough. We already have 3 fantastic institutions at Sixth Form College, Hotwood Hall College and Rochdale Training, who are already attracting students from outside the borough. Working with AMPI, they're going to take the skills and training offering to another level. They will be having university partners working alongside them in AMPI, and that will attract students from not just across the UK, but I think from outside the UK to come and study in Rochdale.
Being asked a question from Mason Robot, and once again, you can submit a question through the Q&A facility. What is the focus of the Research Institute, and how are we looking to current local businesses to get involved?
I'm going to back that question on to Tony and Paul, because they will tell you very eloquently, much more so than I can, precisely what AMPI is going to be doing in terms of its research and development. And I would prefer them to answer that question, because the answers are amazing. No,
absolutely. And another question that we've been asked, Alan Reeson has asked, has the construction contract been awarded yet as regards to AMPI?
No, it hasn't. It's too early for that.
Okay. A final question before we come on to the panel that you mentioned to earlier. One of the key USPs of AMPI is it's industry-led. Why is that approach so important?
AMPI is being set up to develop the manufacturing technologies of the future. It's the manufacturers in the private sector that know what they want, that know what they need. So therefore, it's critical that private sector industry is at the very heart of AMPI. And so it delivers what's needed.
And you can see that from the stakeholders on the conversation now. Paul, you've passed the test, 10 out of 10 for displaying, explaining to people what AMPI is. Thanks very much for that as well. I've written a big note on my thing. It's funny, actually, you write the word manufacturing once instead of machinery, and then you repeat it throughout. So I'm glad you picked up on that, the Advanced Machinery and Productivity Institute, but that's the last time I'm referring to it by its long name. Thanks very much, Paul. Let the sun keep shining in Rochdale. I'd like to introduce our panel, and it's a fantastic panel, actually. I've got Mike Emmerich, who's the author of a special report about levelling up and why AMPI is so important to that. Tony Bannon, you mentioned him earlier, CEO of Precision Technologies Group, always very good form, and he's been banging the drum for this for a long, long time. Julia Heap, Principal and CEO of Hotwood Hall College, and last but not least, Paul Shaw, Head of Engineering Divisions at the National Physical Laboratory. I'm going to start with you good self, Mike Emmerich, the author of the report. You've advised central government, politicians, Greater Manchester Combined Authority. You've been around a long time, Mike. You've even advised former Prime Minister David Cameron. You've been a consultant more recently for 6 years. Just tell us a bit about what you do.
Well, I've advised David Cameron when I stood next to him in a loo once, and we had a word. I actually worked for Tony Blair as a civil servant in his policy unit. But so I think the thing about so what I do as a business person, what my company does, based in Manchester and London, is we work with places around the country. We work with private companies, with universities, with councils and local enterprise partnerships to put projects together. So just yesterday, something happened in Cambridge. So one of my clients is the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, and they just yesterday published a vision on their sort of 50-year development, which we worked with them on and supported them through. And that's not unlike what we're talking about with AMPI here, because there you've got AstraZeneca, Abcam, 2 of the world's most important teaching hospitals and the university, all working out how to make the best of what they've got. And in a very different, but in one way, very similar way, that's what AMPI is about. It's led by the private sector, but it's about working out how everyone can work together to support what this unique set of institutions and above all companies in Rochdale.
you've written a report that highlighted that the UK is by some measures the most geographically unequal developed economy in the world. Just tell us what you found.
So what you've got in this peculiar country of ours is a political centralisation. So, Steve Rumbelow, no matter what happens in Rochdale, Steve Rumbelow cannot spend a penny more than he earns in any year on his revenue budget, because it's all controlled from the centre. But all capital investment is controlled from the centre. We've seen with the NHS, the vaccine program is going fantastically well because it's a standard product that the NHS can just shove into our arms. But on track, test and trace, the centralised model we had was run for a while, and bluntly, it spent billions and billions of pounds and didn't work very well. And so we're politically centralised. And over time, what that's done is to centralise the economy on London and the South East as well. And the statistics prove that very clearly. Output per head is higher in the South. All the decision makers in government are in the South, increasingly corporately, which again is why I think AMPI is such a lovely illustration of how if people really have resolved that you can do things differently, and why I'm excited to be involved in it.
There's a lot of talk about the Golden Triangle, which is the unofficial grouping of the elite research universities in Cambridge, London and Oxford. Do you think the AMPI initiative will level up that process, or does it just go one step towards levelling up that process?
It won't level up. This West Germany threw, I think it was 600 billion euros at levelling up East Germany after the reunification, and the evidence is mixed on whether it worked. I would imagine the economy of Rochdale the output of Rochdale is somewhere in the region of £3-4 billion a year, even £30 million, though it's a big sum of money, is a drop in the ocean if it's used properly, like a pound a week put in your kid's saving account when they're 5 or 6. By the time they're an adult, that's grown into a tidy pot. And I think this money invested in AMPI, in the sensible activities of real businesses, exactly as Paul was saying a minute ago, who know what they need and know what they want. What it could do is have a snowball effect over a period. And I think that's what AMPI's got to be about in the short to medium term, getting that snowball effect.
How do we get, and it's a challenging question, but you've got lots of books behind you, so I'm sure you'll have the answer.
I've even read some of them.
How do we get all the economies of the UK firing to create sustainable growth?
I think, in my lifetime, we've gone through governments who actively didn't care. And, Margaret Thatcher's government, though, whatever you think about Margaret Thatcher and the Conservative government at that time, had an experiment, which was to let the market rip. And what that did with a rising exchange rate and falling government spending was to close down the textiles and much of the manufacturing industry in a very few years. Then we had benign neglect under the Major, and I probably, if we're honest about it, the Blair and Brown governments too. And then we've had a sort of a bit of activism that's starting to play with this issue. And I think that's why the Towns Fund, the Strength in Places Fund that AMPI's into, the Levelling Up funds that are coming, this is an important moment for us, because we haven't really done industrial policy as meaningfully as this. We spent lots of money, a lot of it on unemployment, a lot of it on things that didn't work. What I think could make a difference, and why I think AMPI is so very, very important, is that a lot of the levelling up policy, the regional policy we've had in this country, has been trying to get people to be things they're not. So when I was a civil servant, we all thought that we'd have clusters everywhere, and everywhere said they were going to be a biotech cluster. When they were a farming community, or it was a nuclear area like Cumbria. What I think is the kernel of potential success in AMPI, if it's nurtured right, is that it's rooted in the place. It's rooted in Rochdale and the communities up and down the M62 either side of it, that still, despite all the bad policy from government over a very long time, of governments of every colour, it's still there, still chugging away, still innovating. And if we can, through AMPI, help to get those companies to be even better at what they are, then that is a way of levelling up. There's a line that the American economist Bruce Katz uses that he gets from Dolly Parton that I always think is absolutely cracking, which is that the route to success is to find out who you are and do it on purpose. And I think that's what AMPI is about, and I think it's why it's a contribution to levelling up.
I didn't have you down as a Dolly Parton fan. But,
I'm not. I can't stand it, but that's a great line.
Okay, just to say, Stephen Bennett's asked a question. We'll be answering your questions afterwards, but please submit your questions. We've got thought we've got a panel of experts here, so I'll wait to the end to ask them. So Howard Bernstein, the former chief executive of Manchester City Council, and to a lesser extent Leeds as well, they laid out their stall to do things at scale, and it's paid dividends. You know, do you think that towns and cities need to do bold initiatives like AMPI to as a statement of intent?
Success is always about a combination of big things and little things. I worked in the Howard Bernstein years in Manchester, and was responsible for a lot of the economic policy over the last 20 years. I think what Manchester did and what Leeds did, and to a degree Liverpool, was to invest in the things that were right for them, bringing the city centre office stock up to scratch, bringing back mass rapid transit so people can get in and out quickly into the jobs, improving the public realm. But that was right for them. I don't think that in and of itself would be right for Rochdale. That's why I love that Dolly Parton quote, find out who you are and do it on purpose. And what Rochdale is, as Steve said, at the very start of this conversation, is Rochdale's always been a manufacturing town. Paul said it as well. It's always been a place that makes things. It still does. What AMPI is about is finding its answer as a bold initiative to what Rochdale needs to be in the future.
So when we talk about Rochdale and we link it to Dolly Parton, not a link I thought I'd be making today, do we think that Rochdale's found it's found its place, if you like, it's found its purpose, and AMPI is very much part of the agenda?
I'd say what AMPI represents is not Rochdale finding its purpose. It's the civic and the business collectively supporting some entrepreneurs who've always been about what Rochdale's about. So maybe collectively Rochdale's remembering what it's about. But Chris, this is not about the brilliance of Tony and Paul that we're going to hear about in a minute. Though I absolutely defer to them. It's got to be about the other businesses as well, because if it's just about a couple of businesses, and a few people, that doesn't change anything. What we know from where this region found its roots 200 years ago is that it's about everybody, men and women, working in different kinds of businesses, with those businesses innovating, training, creating jobs. So this has got to be something that's not about a couple of people in a shiny building. This has got to be, if it's going to be a success, about the whole place, the whole community getting behind it.
So, does that make it more authentic if it's got real businesses supporting it? Is that the idea? For it to work, it needs real authentic businesses supporting it.
Of course it does. I mean, the failed regional policy I talked about was sort of the man in Whitehall knows best sort of mentality. And one of the things that one of the reasons I really like it is that in a very understated way, the people who've driven this idea from over the last few years have been clear they don't want it to be public sector led, and with the support of the Rochdale Development Agency and the council, that's the way it remains. It's led by the private sector, and if it ends up public sector led, it'll go the same way as a great deal of regional policy before it. It'll be a failure. Okay,
and one of the Q&As comes from the anonymous attendee who points out that Dolly Parton is a brilliant businesswoman. We need to acknowledge that. No, most definitely is, actually. It's a fascinating story. Thank you very much.
Just makes lousy music.
Well, we're going to go from Dolly Parton to Tony Bannon, CEO of Precision Technologies Group. Tony, how are you?
Good morning. Very well, thank you. Chris?
Okay. Now, for those people who don't know, just tell us what Precision Technology Group does.
Okay, so PTG, Precision Technologies Group, is an advanced manufacturing business, essentially, it's got two lines of business: machinery, manufacturing machinery, that's machines that make metal goods generally, and it also has a business that makes special components on those machines. And PTG's main business is Holroyd. Holroyd is in Milnrow, and a lot of people on the call will have seen the big blue building just on the side of Elizabethan Way. It's been in Milnrow since the late 1800s. Holroyd was founded in Manchester in 1860. So it's been around a long time. So the machines that we make essentially are for very, very complicated parts, such as precision gears and what we call worms in engineering, which are a worm form, which is a helical component that effectively either drives another component or compresses gases and so on. So, and those are much more ubiquitous than you might think, actually. So if you're flying an aeroplane, it's possible, it's likely to have an air system that's been driven by a Holroyd rotor. Certainly in the American military helicopters have got Holroyd systems in there. Several of the F1 teams have got gears in the cars that have been made on Holroyd's machines, and so on. We also have another newish line of business which we've really pushed and developed this last 3-4 years, which is for special welding machines for making electric vehicle, the belly pans that hold the batteries in electric vehicles. We jumped on that. We saw that opportunity a few years ago and got into that relatively early. That's turned out to be a very, very big business for us. So advanced machinery and those components I just mentioned about the helical stuff, compressor rotors and whatnot. We have 3 factories around the world making those. One in Milnrow, obviously, as a contractor, that is, not just as a producer in volume, but as a contractor to other customers. One in Holroyd, one in China, and one in Spartanburg, South Carolina, in the US. So it's been interesting days this last year or so.
No, in fact, it's just under a year since I think I came to see you. Actually, you'd recently come back from China. It's amazing how time flies. I think you know, your good self and Paul Shaw first talked about the need for something like AMPI when he was an academic at Cranfield in 2006. You were the tech director for a special air bearing spindle company called Westwind Air Bearings at the time. What's the problem you're trying to fix with AMPI?
The issue is, the challenge is if you accept the premise that a manufacturing sector is important in a diverse economy, and I think most of the people on this call probably do, but not everybody does, it's important to recognise. Manufacturing is about 12% of GDP. It varies year to year, but it's roughly around that. It's been declining and it's more or less flattened out at that over the last 20 or so years. But as I think Paul mentioned earlier, this is one of the statistics we're aware of, is that for every, and there's about somewhere between 6 and 8 million people employed in manufacturing, but there's more than 3 people employed in the service sector to support each of those manufacturing jobs. And it's across all of those service businesses. If you accept that manufacturing is a key part of an advanced economy, and let's face it, why wouldn't you? Because without manufacturing, you can't produce the food you need. You can't treat the people that are sick in hospital. You can't operate trains, planes, automobiles, all the rest of it, let alone defend yourself in times of war. If you haven't got a manufacturing sector, then those issues become, you become dependent on other nations providing them. So advanced manufacturing is at the heart. Now, if you then extrapolate that back, the thing that underpins manufacturing is the ability to make the machines that do the manufacturing. And we have a massive issue in the UK in that our productivity levels on a competitive, on a national, international scale are very low relatively. Really interesting presentation the other week by Mike Wilson from the Catapult, who's a robotics specialist, an automation specialist, and he produced a graph that was horrifying, but absolutely, in terms of a wake-up call, was absolutely necessary, which was that for robots per head of population, employed population, the UK doesn't even come in the top 20 in the world for this automation stuff. So we're something like 24th in the world, with 80 odd robots per 10,000 people employed in manufacturing. I think Singapore is at the top of the list, and it's got 1,000 robots per 10,000 people. Now, I'm not suggesting that we turn into Singapore, but it illustrates the point that we have, for many, many years, had a very laid back, and Mike said it beautifully, actually. I think he said benign neglect. For generation after generation, the manufacturing sector has been neglected by governments. It's a cultural issue as much as anything. It's not political. You can't blame one side or the other. It's just that manufacturing has just been there in the background. and has been allowed to carry on, gradually getting smaller and making the best of it. And a couple of people have already mentioned the fact that we've just dug in and done our thing is the way it's been, but that is not the way to develop, to support, develop and grow an advanced economy. And our work has shown, and this was the catalyst for that conversation between Paul and me quite all those years ago, actually. I went to Cranfield for for a technical project in my previous business, and we got talking about this. That's the way it's been, but it isn't in our competitor economies, especially in the ones that are most associated with advanced manufacturing. Germany, Austria, Italy, Switzerland, Japan, and even the US in certain pockets. They don't do it like that. They have a different approach to it. And either we wake up and try to do something like that, or we just accept the status quo.
I'm not immersed in the world of manufacturing and advanced manufacturing. You know, I'm just a simple layman. So if I use very simple layman terms, effectively what we're saying, we need the machines to create the machines. There's a gap. That's where the gap is. Would that be fair?
Yes, it's exactly that, actually. So the Industrial Revolution didn't start because we, got lots of cotton and wool in England or in the north of the UK. It started because we recognised the need to process those commodities into goods and into stuff that people needed and wanted to buy. And so the machinery was the foundation and underpinning of the Industrial Revolution, and that is still the case. So it isn't necessarily, it's partly the metals processing and still those trade skills and skills are a huge part of this, which we'll come to, I know, in a few minutes. But it's also about it's more now to do with the ability to connect machines together, to integrate machines into an industrial process that's efficient and productive. That's where the opportunity is. And it's going to be a lot more systems based, and we hear these phrases thrown around like digital technology, digital revolution. Well, that's real. It's not an abstract concept. Machinery, production machinery to produce goods, food, pharmaceuticals and whatnot, anything really, anything of an advanced nature that's not an artisan product is far more integrated now than it ever has been, and it's going to carry on. It's going to get even deeper as that. So we have to be ready with the workforce and the IP, the intellectual property, and the intellectual capital to be able to deliver those services, those products, and support all of that in the future.
We're going to talk about the skills gap, actually, which one of the questions we've had is from Sue Ayres. How do we ensure that AMPI inspires our young people to pursue a career in advanced machinery and manufacturing, especially those whose education has been badly disrupted by COVID-19? How big is the skills gap, would you say? And then if we answer Sue's question, how do we inspire young people to pursue this as a career through AMPI?
That might be the biggest question of all. I shout at the radio when somebody says, "Oh, that's a good question." I always shout, "Well, give a good answer then." So I'll try. It's a huge challenge. It is probably the key challenge because there is a movement, there is an acknowledgement and a slight shift in the way that STEM subjects are being viewed and are being aspired to by our population. Just recently, the universities are reporting now a much increased application level for STEM subjects as opposed to the arts and liberal arts and so on. So that's encouraging, but that in itself is only part of it. It's not just about the universities, it's about the whole of the training and if you like, the career aspirational levels. So how do we do it? Well, first of all, we've got to generate the excitement and interest in this particular, in these activities. And we've got it, and we're not historically very good at this, by the way. So first of all, we need to explain what we do, because this perception of engineering and technology being boring and all about factories is not true. Mostly when you'll see a piece on a news program about industrial production or manufacturing, you'll see a dirty workshop with somebody welding in a shower of sparks because You know, that's very often how it's portrayed. So first of all, we need to explain what we do in a way that's accurate, which is very exciting, because if you think about satellites is a perfect example. We have a really, really fabulous industry working behind the scenes in this country, beavering away, making satellites, and we're acknowledged as one of the world leaders, but nobody ever really hears about it unless you're connected to the industry. So we've got to publicise those successes. We have a far more joined up approach in the way we portray it and represent it across all forms of media. And as much as anything, we need as an industry to talk it up. So we've also got fabulous training suppliers and providers locally. A couple have been mentioned already, you know, Hotwood Hall, RTA. Rochdale has been working with RTA for its apprenticeship program. Well, I've been at Holroyd 20 odd years, and
we're Rochdale Training, aren't we?
Rochdale Training, yes. Superb organisation that, you know, typically on any year we're taking between usually 4 or 5 apprentices. We've got to carry on the apprenticeship schemes because they're crucial. Because a lot of these skills are there's a bit of a disconnect between what vocational and academic skills are. In these technology areas, there's a lot of overlap. It's not as clear cut as we've historically imagined it to be. So the people from these organisations like Rochdale, RTA and Hotwood, working closely with universities, will help this, you know, the point of the question being, how do we improve it? By having a more connected training programme and ambition that's understood and communicated better. I think that's what we've got to do.
I'm just mindful of time, so I'm going to come back to you shortly, but I'm going to go to Paul Shaw, Head of Engineering Divisions at the National Physical Laboratory. Just to say, we'll probably be finishing at about 9:10 today, just after, because we've had some questions that have come through that I want to come back to. Paul, you're the Head of Engineering Divisions at the National Physical Laboratory, to give you your full title, or one of your titles. Can you just tell us a bit about what you and the MPL do?
Good morning, Chris. So the National Physical Laboratory does a lot of things very broad. It's the UK's National Measurement Institute. Now, that might sound a little bit less clear in the sense of its importance. What it does is it makes sure that all the measurements that support trade and science are done correctly with the right level of effectiveness, with good levels of traceability and agreement. So my role is as Head of Engineering. So I'm not the Head of Engineering Divisions, I'm the Head of Engineering, which is essentially advises MPL on the engineering infrastructure it needs to be able to support all the issues that the UK is challenged with. So the obvious one in the last 12 months has been about COVID. So we've had a team in the last 12 months that has put together at MPL the test facilities for medical ventilators that were needed to be developed very quickly to make sure that when instruments and machines are built, they're built and they work well. Historically, and I'll be short about it, but MPL has done things like the development of radar to detect aircraft coming across the channel. It's developed the atomic clock technology that sits behind GPS systems. And as I say, last year we worked very hard on medical ventilator performance testing. We have 1,000 scientists and engineers. Many of them are working on things like the development of measurement techniques for detecting and clarifying how cancers look and how we understand them and how we treat them.
Your story is an interesting one, and there was a story about you this week. You were a professor at Cranfield University. You've taught at MIT in the US. You're one of the most acclaimed names. This is a bit like This Is Your Life, Paul. You're one of the most acclaimed names in the world of precision engineering. You left school at the age of 15 with 1 O-level, didn't you? And then you're lucky enough to get an apprenticeship. Your story is not a typical story, is it?
No, I'm not quite sure how I slipped the 1 O-level bit. You know, when you pinch yourself after a talk, you think, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
But in a sense, maybe I should. Maybe it's not a typical story. what I was lucky. I got a second opportunity and I took it. And I hasten to add that the 1.0 level wasn't a consequence of the school or the teachers. It was that I wasn't in the right place to learn at the time I went to school. Now, I was 16 by the time I left school. But by doing an apprenticeship, it allowed me to mature into a person where I could learn better. And it wasn't that I was stupid when I was at school. I was just not in the right place to learn in the way I have gone on to learn. And I think AMPI, and we're mainly talking about AMPI, creating opportunity for people to be their best is one of the things that AMPI needs to deliver in the region.
Now, we're going to hear from Julie Heap afterwards at Hotwood, and they're doing some amazing work with apprentices. Just to their message that's come on the chat from Louise Putland about that very thing. Just talk about AMPI in terms of when did you first identify the need for something like AMPI?
Well, I think Tony's mentioned that we've probably been talking on and off about this. We're getting on for 20 years. I mean, the ideas matured, if we're honest about it. It wasn't suddenly that a light bulb moment. It's become more and more obvious that the UK produces less of the machinery that it needs to make the products that we all want to own and use. The UK is the 9th biggest manufacturing economy in the world, yet we produce machinery at around £500 million a year. That's less than 0.5% of the world's machines. And those numbers are out of balance. As the 9th largest manufacturer in the world, the UK should be making very much more of its own machinery, and particularly if we think we want a resilient manufacturing economy. Your career is impressive. You worked in Sweden as a technical director of Sweden's biggest machine tooling company, which is part of the SKF group. We spoke last week and you gave me a statistic which really shocked me about Switzerland's machinery manufacturing capability compared to the UK's. Because that puts it at some sort of scale, doesn't it? Yeah, so what are we? We're 68 million people in the UK, and we produce about 500 million by value of machinery or automation systems. In contrast, Switzerland's 8 million people. They're not badly paid people in Switzerland, and they're producing 4 times as much equipment, machinery equipment for manufacturing as we are. And that doesn't seem balanced. That's not what you would expect from a balanced manufacturing high-tech country like the UK.
The job of events like this and the job of people like me is to try to explain it in a layman's language, for somebody like myself. When I pick up my iPhone, I see an iPhone, I see a way to communicate. That's what I see. You don't see it like that, do you? You see the machinery that sits behind it. Just explain what you mean.
Okay, so I mean, we talked about this last week. We have an iPhone, or any phone for that matter. Other brands are available. You might see it as one product, but if you just question yourself about what it is, it's camera. Very often these days, it's 3 or 4 cameras. It has speakers in it, has microphones in it, has a GPS system in it. It has a fantastic display with 3.5 million light-emitting pixels that can change color 100 times a second. It has a computer system in it that's got about 8.5 billion transistors. All of those little tiny features need to be manufactured to produce what you'll think is one product. But the major components that this one product represents has to be made by very high-tech precision mechatronic equipment. And if we can get people to think about that equipment as the equipment that gives fantastic jobs and generates huge wealth, then AMPI, if we put it together correctly, will make it such that these things won't be imported devices in the future. And we're not talking about 5 or 10 years, but we should be planning for our children to be able to say they're proud of these things that are made in the UK, and they talk about that to their children, because we're not telling our kids we're proud about it because these are made in the UK.
A final question from me, actually, and I say this as a massive compliment. You could become like the Chris Whitty of precision engineering. You could be the person who explains it in that sort of terminology, because it explains it to me. Do you think Rochdale could be at the centre of the UK's machinery manufacturing sector because of AMPI?
Well, where we are today, I mean, somebody might argue whether it's 20 miles across the border, across the Pennines, but at the moment, the body of machinery manufacturers in the UK has a centre of gravity close to Rochdale. And it's a sector that needs to bring to life, and from what I'm seeing from people in the Rochdale region, if it's going to have a success opportunity, at this point in time, the centre of gravity for it to be successful is in the Rochdale area.
I find it really exciting. Thank you very much. Going to come to, don't go anywhere, we'll be coming back for some questions afterwards. Julia Heath, Principal and CEO of Hotwood Hall College. Julia, how are you?
Good morning, Chris. I'm very well, thanks.
And the sun is shining in your corner of the Northwest as well.
Always shines in Hotwood Hall. I always say that, don't I, Chris?
You always say that. You always say that. Sorry to have kept you waiting, but Hotwood Hall College recently announced plans for a £6.1 million extension to its technology centre. Just tell us why you're doing that for.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been probably about 4 years in the planning now, and working with both the local authority and Greater Manchester Combined Authority in terms of how we can bring it to life. And it's really linked to growth in student numbers who are wanting to study in our technology centre. So our technology centre has both construction and engineering. And linked then in relation to that growth, it's about preparing our young people and adults to go into work. So it is around the advanced technology. So quite a lot of the investment is going into some new machinery as well as space, so that we can house all the young people and adults who want to come and study here. So it will be focused around all advanced techniques in both construction, manufacturing, electrical. And it was great to hear Tony before about electrical vehicles as well, and how we can support the motor vehicle industry in terms of their technology advances too. So we put in around 4.4 million of our own funds into that to support that growth and advanced techniques, and then being supported by the Greater Manchester Combined Authority for about £1.7 million. We're just about to submit planning permission and hopefully get it some work done during the summer.
We've heard from some of the other speakers, and they've spoken very much about, you know, the work of Hotwood, and they spoke about Rochdale training as well. And I've discussed a £6.1 million extension. Where do you think you fit into AMPI? Do you see yourself as a key part of the jigsaw? What's the description that you would use?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are a key part of the jigsaw. I mean, I think that we've talked today around a lot of the machinery requirements, but all of those machinery requirements require people to either operate or create them and maintain them. So, you know, we've got a pipeline of students here who will be able to see themselves in employment, in an advanced technology employment. You know, and both what Steve Rumbelow talked about in terms of the Kingsway Park development for AMPI and the Northern Gateway, we can near enough see those from our sites at Hotwood Hall College. So our students will be able to see that. I think that in terms of our place in that, we're intrinsic in supporting employers, but equally employers supporting us as well in terms of how we can get our students skilled to the level that the employers are requiring, and how those students know about the techniques and the machinery that is operating in the industries. So it's a real true partnership. And I think that what we demonstrate in Rochdale is about how we do work in partnership together. So, you know, we've got a fantastic post-16 offer in Rochdale. It's something that we shout about quite a lot in terms of Rochdale Sixth Form College, ourselves and Rochdale Training Association. And what we do is we work together to make sure that our students have a real high class offer. And what we want to do is support our employers with that. And our employers support us too.
It's almost a virtuous circle. We've heard a lot about the skills gap. Hotwood Hall very much is creating this conveyor belt of talent coming through. You need a relationship with employers, which you've got, where you can maybe get work placements for your students. Then you turn out this conveyor belt of talent who would maybe go to AMPI, and then from AMPI, they feed into businesses in Rochdale and the surrounding regions. Is that the way you see it?
Absolutely. And I think there is another piece of that jigsaw. It's around those higher level skills too. And it was great to hear Paul's life story then about how he got there, because our young people, you know, we say quite a lot these days, you are what you see, and you don't necessarily know what you want to do when you're 16 and leave school. And some of our students may not get the results that they need to be able to go on and achieve what they think they need to achieve at 16. And being supported as an apprentice or being supported as a student with work experience and industry placements, you can really see then those, you know, mentors that you get who can be able to inspire and create that ambition in yourself. So yeah, absolutely, the virtuous circle of students coming in, going, getting work experience, getting industry placements, being mentored, our staff being supported by employers in terms of how they can upskill themselves as well, so that we've all got the skills that we need to generate the economic returns that we want.
Yeah, I just did a message in the chat actually from Alan Reeson to say Louise came to see me yesterday and we are looking at signing up to take an apprentice as we need to invest in the future of manufacturing in the local area. The reason I told a story about Paul Shaw leaving school at the age of 15 with 1 O-level was that somebody could have dismissed him and written him off at the age of 15 or 16, and yet we would have missed a really, really, you know, intelligent, articulate, you know, fantastic vision in the world of precision engineering and technology. What part of apprentices got to play in the levelling up process in your view, Julia?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be huge, aren't they, in terms of, you know, when we talk to employers, you know, and talking to Tony and Paul and Mike a couple of weeks ago, and yourself, Chris, we were talking about, you know, an ageing working population, those skills leaving the industries. And what we've got is, you know, a third of our 16 to 18-year-olds are studying in our technology centre. So we've got students there who are excited to be able to learn new skills. They want to be supported by people who can give them the skills around employability. And, you know, we can see then that the apprenticeships will be that new blood that will be able to invigorate those industries and be able to see them through in terms of their employment. And I think what is, to coin your media phrase, Chris, in terms of a game changer, is they can see, you know, thriving employment in the borough that they can be part of.
Well, just looking at another message, Stephen Bennett posts, we've been looking for new apprentices, 8 applicants. Louise, please can you contact us to see if we can help or to see if you can help? Absolutely. I think that call will be happening as we speak. I get the impression, and I'm going to open it up to conversations now, but I get the impression that the stars are starting to align. Would that be fair? And AMPI is probably the catalyst for that, or one of the catalysts?
Absolutely. I mean, we've our investment was because of growth and you know, recognizing that we need more advanced machinery than we've got. But you know, students are very canny people, you know, and their parents are very canny. What they can see is that for the past couple of years and through the pandemic, that the industries that have continued in terms of construction and engineering are industries that you probably want to go into. You know, what we've seen is that some of those areas have really thrived over the last few years, but then through the pandemic, and therefore that sparks some of that interest that we've talked about. But I think that we've all got some work to do in terms of championing engineering, getting out into schools, getting employers into organisations like ours, the Sixth Form College and RTA, so that we can make those stories real, so that our students can tangibly see what opportunities there are out there for them.
Okay, I'm going to open up some questions actually. If you keep your answers short and sweet, because we want to get wrapped up in about 10 minutes. We had a question earlier from Mason Rowbottom. What is the focus of the Research Institute and how are we looking to current local businesses to get involved? So Tony Bannon or Paul Shaw, who wants to answer that question?
Well, I'll go first then, if that's all right, Paul.
Yeah, go for it.
So essentially, we're going to be very heavily promoting local engagement in industry and company engagement. It's essential. This thing can't work unless we get people involved, and the whole purpose of it is to provide some support. Essential that there's still quite a business case to develop, and we've got to do some work yet. But the difficult to deliver aspects of many of our target base are things like specialist technical services, such as certain design functions and analysis function, testing, and so on. So that's the key part, and intellectual property advice, because that's another sticking point normally. It's very expensive going the conventional routes and so on. So there's a service kind of offer that we want to develop with local local partners. We want to very much generate a supply chain cluster. That's really crucial. If we can, it's going to take time. This is not going to be a week or two or a year or two. This is a long game. Is this? We're trying to turn around a tanker in a sense. So it's going to take a good few years, but we can start somewhere. The R&D element is crucial from Mason's question. We don't currently have a strong R&D ethos across all our businesses, and there are pockets of excellence clearly. But the idea is to generate collaborations between businesses and the supporting university, the partner universities, to generate an R&D, a lot of more activity in R&D, particularly the D in the sense of developing products. That's the purpose of it, and AMPI should be at the center of it. So it's the go-to place for businesses that decide they want to innovate and do something different. Where do they go to start that process off once they know roughly what the product is, and they want some assistance and support in developing the idea? That's where AMPI should provide a hub function. Thanks very much.
Tony Lloyd has posted a nice message to say, you know, he found it a great session, and that it's great to see the way Rochdale is viewed from the outside now. Paul Shaw, I'm going to come to the next question because I'm mindful of time. Stephen Bennett said, when AMRC in Sheffield was started, there were local SMEs who, quote, had their noses pushed out. Although your USP is industry-led, what measures are you putting in place to make sure local technology businesses are in a position to benefit and contribute? Can you answer that one, Paul?
Yeah, I'll try, and I recognise that problem. And perhaps the best way I can respond to the question is that we for sure recognise that if you put in a big public funded organisation or public supported organisation, there's a tendency to race to the top of manufacturing supply chains. And that in effect can embolden the established international supply chains. And that's exactly what we're going to try and prevent doing. So when we build and we have projects to build new machinery through AMPI, we will work with local companies so that everything from the control systems, the wiring of the control systems, the design and the manufacture of the mechanical component parts, the web systems that are needed to advertise the products, the human machine interfaces that need young digitally savvy kids that are essentially the kids that are enthused to work in the gaming area or want to work in artificial intelligence to apply intelligence within those machines. We will try to work with the companies, and the best way to work with the local companies is to do it with young people in the region through apprentice and sponsored student programs so that it becomes a whole ecosystem in response to the lack of the fact that we don't make enough machinery for ourselves in the UK. I think the short answer is to the question is that we recognise it's a significant problem, and we will keep it centre of what we are trying to put in place to ensure it doesn't happen again.
I'm recognising we've got some really clever people on the panel. A lot of the questions are directed very much at the whole AMPI technical stuff. We've got Mike Emmerich here, you know, but so forgive me. I think it's probably another question for Paul or for Tony. But so if you answer this question again, Paul, Zena Me says, you know, are there any plans to create a high performance leadership development strategy for Rochdale? Could there be a collaboration with business schools like Cranfield, which obviously you were a professor at, to run alongside AMPI? Is that something that you see?
Yeah, I think all of those things are on the table. I mean, what I don't think we should do is get ahead of ourselves. I think Mike made it very clear. We've made some progress. We've still got some hurdles to jump yet. And I think we need to put the roadmap in play of addressing the first hurdles and getting over them before we go to the bigger things about leadership programs, which we might involve different universities locally or otherwise. To start with, we need to get the ecosystem of machinery manufacturing working with local companies in the Rochdale area before we look at more national programs, I would say.
I'm going to ask Mike a quick question, Mike Emmerich. Mike, there's a question for M Booth, from M Booth. To get young people interested in advanced manufacturing, it's vital that we reach years 8 and 9, as well as their parents and guardians. It's far too late when pupils are about to make subject choices. How will AMPI and Hotwood go about solving this for Rochdale and the wider catchment area? I will come to Julia Heap in a second, but when we talk about the levelling up, that levelling up has to start at a young age, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's back to what Tony said before, and indeed what Julia was saying. This isn't it's a tragedy of the commons, Mark, you know, 300th time you've seen it in your life. It's that everyone knows that if every bright kid just goes to do A-levels and tries to get into the best university they can and never come back, that's going to be great for that kid, probably, but lousy for the place. You know, I don't think anybody in communities around here, Rochdale, Manchester, anywhere like that, talk enough about the opportunities there are, which means businesses have got to really sell what they're doing. They've got to give kids a decent whack, because, you know, they're not going to work for nothing when they can go and do jobs that pay. You know, kids who've got choices don't want to work for buttons. They want to pay for proper money. Then there's got to be proper provision of a kind that Julie's talking about. Parents have got a role to play, and we're all, you know, a lot of us are parents. So I don't think this is any one person's problem. And the problem is, because it's no one person's problem, no one does it as well as they should do. Something like AMPI, working with a college, can be a real focus for changing that over time. Okay,
just got the call to say, you know, we've run out of time. I've started, so I will finish. I think we've got through most of the questions, possibly not through all of them. A couple of points that were raised by Maria Donnelly is how important is it for employers to support students with industry placements. That's something I know Julia is working a lot. So if you are an employer and you are looking to get involved, the one way of doing that is through placements as well. Thanks very much for everyone for attending today. I mean, I think we got over 145 people at one point as well. And some really nice feedback as well from people that I do respect, like, you know, Danny Simpson, who's doing amazing work at Mid Communications as well. So that's all from me, and that's all from our speakers as well. If you have got a question or you want to get involved, you want to contact one of our panelists, feel free, just submit a question or send something through to Alison Salas, who as always is making these things happen behind the scenes and not getting the credit that she deserves. Thanks very much for your time, everybody, and until the next time, stay safe.
Bye.